Most drama queens are looking for the mic on the main stage of the abyss. They don't want meaning, just a spotlight in a popularity contest where the uglier the drama, the bigger the score. Validation is a cheap token, and the price is your weakened soul. They share their drama in the public square, hoping it will fill the emptiness of the void. It's not about finding themselves, it's about becoming a trending topic for the audience. They confuse attention for affirmation. That's the most pathetic tightrope act of all. Using fake smiles for likes, and the joke is, the more you cry, the louder the applause. You're all just waiting for my bus, the one with one seat, to take you one way to nowhere. Enjoy the ride! Most drama queens are looking for the mic on the main stage of the abyss. Buttons, or I'll send ice. They don't want me.
Greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Want to remind everybody, hit the like, share, and subscribe button. There is a PayPal link in the description. If everybody would feel free to share some love, all is appreciated. Trying to round up funds to get the StreamYard up to full panel operation for the podcast. And in the meantime, everybody enjoy my new intro, and we will be right back.
Leaving the noise and the drama behind. High etiquette held as the ultimate key. This is the Short Burst Podcast TV. See the mirror for what it is. The progression begins now. Step into the light or the shadow it casts. A look in the mirror, stripping the mask. The ego deflects what the id wants to hide, but we find the truth on the edge of the slide. The void isn't empty, it's a canvas of gray, where the ghosts of our bias come out to play. You point at the monster, you point at the screen, but it's only a shadow that's being seen. We sit in the silence where the tension is rife, dissecting the ego with a surgical knife. From the depths of the abyss to the clarity of mind, leaving the noise and the drama behind. High etiquette held as the ultimate key. This is the Short Burst Podcast TV. See the mirror for what it is. The progression begins now.
Okay. And we are back. Let me get my stuff set up here. And we have, and it is in the details section below, Frugal Off Grid. So go down and check him out. We're going to be discussing some of his work. We're going to go over a couple of his videos and see what he has to say when it comes to homeless to off grid. Losing your job, starting with no money, blah, blah, blah. He's got some tips for everybody. Been doing it for a number of years. and he's going to show you what it takes, somebody that's actually doing it. So let's take a look.
A lot of people told me I wouldn't last 3 years out here, that my land was basically unlivable. And they're right about one thing, is a lot of people do fail. But the good news is, it's not that they couldn't possibly do it, it's that they simply didn't have a system. I didn't have a job because I had just been laid off. I did have about $6,000 in savings in a camper van because I had been thinking about living this way. And before I came out here, I first found a really cheap piece of land that fit in my budget, paid cash for it, so I already owned the land outright. I didn't have a source of income, but I had brought enough food, water, and shelter, the camper van, to survive for at least a year. And then I had a little bit.
So the basics of the water, food, and shelter. Simple as that. Simple as that. Water, food, and shelter. Those are the primary things all creatures need. And those are the things you need to start looking at very first. They are priority.
Money. I knew that it might be rough, but I'd be able to get by. So I constantly talk about shelter, water, food, power, income, and I talk about those in depth as well on my website. By starting with my camper van, I had somewhere comfortable to sleep and think. There's a little fridge, solar power. I brought out a year's supply of food, and I had a trailer, not this one, but a smaller one, and a tank for water. And those wound up being, I built the shop and put the tanks over here so I could harvest rainwater. I had a carport so I could park the van under it for shade, and that kept it about 10 degrees cooler. So the first month I had shelter, water, food, power, income. Well, to be clear about income is I had some savings. And then before I came out, I did start the YouTube channel, but I really didn't actually post on it much for the first 2 years. And I created the website and other social media. Although I didn't have cash coming in, starting social media and a website would help me get some kind of reach so that as I did build product and content, people could find it. Then,
and as I've mentioned before, this is an educational platform for the viewers. And as we see here, that's what his intent in doing this was eventually to start making informational videos for other people. And of course, that is a part of his profit mechanism as he grows, just like he's growing his homestead and regrowing and rebuilding the soil and all the other things, as we'll learn. That's how you start out with nothing. You start out like it's like the parable of talents. Maybe you only start out with 1 talent. Maybe you start out with 3. Maybe you start out with 5. Maybe you do have a job in a nice home and multiple vehicles and a motor home. And you can actually buy an extra piece of land while you're still living within society and build it while you're traveling back and forth to do so. Different levels, different talents. So you take your talents and you invest in them. Absolutely, AB Design. Mash them like buttons. Mash them all. Hit that PayPal link too, please. Every little bit helps.
I could monetize it and make some income. I've been planting Bermuda grass all inside of the perimeter. Kind of over here, this area, it's almost like I've got a yard and lawn and backyard and stuff now. It's kind of funny. So I'm going to hop in here. This is mostly excess hay I got to clean out. And then this side is loaded with poo from the entire winter. So we're going to get that cleaned out and use it as compost and
specifically for your information banks, your data banks there, AB. One of my intents on this channel, folks, is to provide these review videos on a regular basis. Maybe do a interview video once a week on people that are actually doing this, contacting these people that are doing this and doing my own interviews with them over the internet. And then, of course, the every other week, the selected topics for the podcast. And then the intervening weeks would be open topics. So that's the program that I'm looking at to keep that the platform growing along with the podcast. So there's other elements rather than just the podcast. The regular reviews that I hope to eventually do on a regular basis, 5-6 days a week, and then an interview one day a week, and then the regular podcast 1 day a week. Intervening weeks on selected topics and open topics. Absolutely appreciate it.
Mulch. So the hands down, very most important thing I did was to stay within my means. I paid off the van. You know, that was part of the plan before I came out here. I paid cash for land. I didn't buy anything out of my means. However, that shop did cost about $4,000 of the $6,000 I initially had. And so I just had to be really careful with the rest. In fact, the day that I finally did list a product for sale.
So like we heard with the bus conversion here last week, and the young man, Isaac Turner, started out with $4,000 on his build. And here it is 5-6 years later, he's doing great. Same with this guy. He started out with 6,000, and here it is 5-6 years later, and look what he's got. He's accomplished by himself. By himself. This does not take community. This is the beginning where communities are established. Again, your local authority, the most local you can get is the most powerful. That's what we appreciate about life, is when we can do this by ourselves. Others see that. It motivates them to be able to do that. And this guy, as we see, started out with 1 talent. There are people out there with 5 talents, 10 talents that can do so much better in a communal organizational fashion. That's what we're looking to build, is going back to the smaller communities out in these areas where we can develop small communities. They don't get bigger than 100 people. They're able to be self-sufficient.
On my website, I had no money left. And I just had to kind of slowly but surely build leverage and let it compound. I wanted to be my own boss. I didn't need somebody to tell me what to do. I certainly wasn't lazy. I wanted to try my hand at growing some of my own food. I wanted a little more autonomy. And I just always thought this lifestyle would be pretty ideal ever since I was maybe 5 years old. I'd watch movies about this kind of life, and I thought that's perfect for me, you know. I bought a lot of material to build the shop, but I also used as much scrap material as I could. I didn't really move to newer material.
Same here, and I hope to reach that one day. I grew up a Boy Scout and loving the outdoors, and I hate being confined in shoes and inside of a box. I love the fresh air. I love the mud squishing between my toes. I like it when I get those small injuries that I notice the observable world around me to be aware. That's what makes me stronger. That's what makes me closer to my true nature and appreciate it.
Until I got to the cabin. This greenhouse was mostly new, but the geothermal back there, that was scrap material. You can see the pig pens here are totally scrap material. And this agricultural shed that has feed and things, this was mostly scrap material. And even my round pen has a lot of scrap material. And
all that scrap material, it's all over the place. The cities are trying to get rid of it. And instead of doing recycling on a lot of this stuff, they're dumping it in the dumps. Now what? 4:36. My apologies, folks. What is going on? Now I've got a lag, and it's got me looping.
A lot of people told me I wouldn't last 3 years out here. Well, that's a large part of how I was able to get things going, so I could grow my own meat and fruit and vegetables. Even the underground water cisterns,
Yes, you notice he said his own meat. You saw the hogs. He's also got a couple horses, you'll see. Plus he's got 3 dogs.
About 6 feet wide, 16 feet long, 6 feet deep. It's 3,600 gallons. It harvests rainwater there. This side I save specifically for drinking water. That's 600 gallons of drinking water, which is quite a bit. And then there's a 4,500 gallon.
I like the old Chevy C10. Those are awesome trucks to have. They especially in this arid flat land here, they do excellent. Except when it rains, of course, it gets kind of slick and muddy. You'll want to be aware of that. But otherwise, tooling around on your own property here, it'll do almost everything you want to do.
Pond over here. I'll dig another underground cistern over by the cabin. And there's another 3,600 gallon cistern underground behind these. The cisterns, they never freeze. They don't get bugs or anything in them. They stay clean because they have good lids that they just have a little gap for airflow, but nothing gets in and out. A little bit of dirt gets down there, but that don't matter. And it's perfectly good for the gardens and livestock. And I can always just filter it if I want it for myself. Same with the pond, can be used for agriculture or gardening. And there's even another pond out there on the pasture for the horses specifically. As far as solar goes, I started with the really small system, about 400 watts of panels on the top of the van, 200 amp hours of battery storage. And I just ran a DC to DC charger so I could start the engine, and when I drove places, it'd charge the system. That was enough to keep a little refrigerator going, to charge my laptop or phone or power tools and so on. And I was even able to run a chest freezer on it carefully by unplugging it.
And again, that brings up one of them issues that I've always like to mention is the electrical. If you don't know what you're doing, folks, do your research so you do know. It's important to understand how imperative it is to stay within the norms when you're using these electrical converters and stuff. A particular fire hazard that could destroy everything you're trying to build and have already gotten to. It could destroy everything, including your life. Be very aware when we're working with this electrical stuff and conversions and everything. One of those parts about technology that can be very detrimental with one little tiny slip up.
Sometimes, or having to start the van sometimes. And I just continued to get small, redundant little systems. 2,000 watt hours, if you get a power station, will power a surprisingly large amount of power if you're, not trying to run stuff. I didn't have a TV for the first 4 or 5 years I was out here. And then just slowly as I could, I expanded. I've got a couple pallets of solar panels now and a couple large solar systems. Basically enough to power a small family home, maybe 2. I've never brought in anything to amend my soil. I've just made compost and mulch and everything all right here from the homestead. And while you could easily pay someone to bring it in, I've just found it to be fun to build all my own compost. And it takes a long, long time to green the desert, but you can eventually, even if you do it yourself. I thought this was a red raspberry tree when I first had it, and now I'm not even sure. Maybe it's boysenberry or something. I guess, you see, I'm not a real skilled gardener. I thought it was a tree, but I guess maybe it's a bush. So we'll see what that turns into.
And there's another one of those aspects, again, that I keep reiterating. Do not believe me. Do not believe the neighbor. Do not believe the government. For crying out loud, do not believe your mother. Do your research so you know. And that's what allows us to be able to start at the lower level, not knowing exactly what we're doing, but we can get ground level information to start and have that firsthand experience to do these things ourselves. So as this man explains, he's got a fish tank down here where he had some bluegills, and his first attempt kind of failed because the cats ate the bluegill. So it comes to say that you have to have these kind of small tanks protected. If you're going to do it in a pond for aquaponics, which we can look up other things later, and we will on that. Aquaponics is a major transition that I think we should make in considering stewarding land and homesteading. In the basics of any homesteading and stewarding the land, like I said, all creatures maintain food, shelter, and clothing. The food line is based upon your watersheds. If there's no watershed, there's going to be less likelihood of life. It's going to be dry and arid like this. The more water shedding we do in these kinds of lands, like rebuilding the soils and making little waterways to help save water and doing the little half moon stuff so that water will pool up and stay in the soil and soak into the soil instead of just running off, the better we're going to be able to live and provide and prosper and replenish. the true nature of our abilities as dominion creatures. We're able to do this stuff that other animals can't, or only do certain parts of the job naturally. Cows' hooves. When they graze in an area for too long, they destroy the soil. They eat too much in that area and they destroy the soil. Whereas if they're traveling along, the hooves will just tender in the top part of the soil and create enough place for natural seeds to fall from the natural plants in the area and create the undergrowth. Otherwise, they end up in these big open pastures and they just destroy them and they become open and barren.
And then this is the original trailer I started with. And it just couldn't handle anything. It was just a handmade trailer. And so after it busted down pretty bad, I just turned it into a tank for my aquaponics system. And I had fish in here, but the cats got them. So I'll just have to build a net around that and then try some more fish. Having a large pump like this keeps oxygen and water flowing so much that the mosquitoes won't even mess with it. And the same happens down here. When this bell siphon is activated, it starts blasting water out, and it's just not a hospitable environment. One of the most commonly asked questions I get is how to find land like this that'll work but is cheap. And it's hard to explain all that, especially over and over. And so eventually I built a system, and it's free and it's on my website. And at first,
and so, like I said, this guy started out 5-6 years ago, pretty much with nothing. Didn't do much with his channel. Didn't even have a TV for the first 5 years. And now he's got his own website, and he's helping others learn how to do it themselves by giving an educational platform on his website, explaining what he's done, what's worked, what didn't. This is the kind of education we need, and it has to be on an autodidactic type basis where we can take that information and learn for our own use and not be streamlined into an indoctrination like the public education system gives us. This is what truly education is all about, is the observable world, not what's in the documentation that everybody puts before you.
Well, there's a beginner guide, so it tells you all about what you'd need to know. Then there's a directory, so you can find friendly off-grid counties. I listed all of them. I did at least 4 counties per state, as long as there was 4 counties. Nationwide, all 50 states. And then after you find a county you like, then you need to find land in it. And so I created a land search tool that'll help you find off-grid properties that you would have a hard time finding otherwise. And then finally, there's a checklist to make sure you don't buy some crappy land, that won't work for you.
Yeah, and so we're talking about details like wells and irrigation and stuff. And so when you look at property around you and you find that their wells are 250 feet as opposed to 40 feet, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. So those are the kind of details he's talking about. Check those out. Make sure you know what you're doing. If you think you're going to buy a piece of land and dig a 40-foot well and come to find out you're having to dig a 350-foot well, it's going to be a lot more expensive. As opposed to the other idea, maybe you don't need a well at all. Maybe you can use cisterns like this guy is by creating your own cisterns. Just digging out holes and lining them with rubber liners and collecting 6,000 gallons of water. All kinds of ways to do this.
I guess what I'm getting at is I worked through a system, shelter, water, food, power, income. I did it in passes. So I had the van, then the shop, then the cabin, you know, and structures for the animals, and adding water and adding storage and adding permaculture, improving the soil, throwing down seed, you know, in passes over time. This fence was super cheap at first, just poly wire. I had T-posts like every 20 feet, but it worked though. And now this is a pretty good fence. And I already have 9-foot posts laid out every 10 feet you saw that solid wood fence, right? So that's going to go all the way around the entire perimeter. That'll block enough wind that I'll be able to start growing more trees. You know, less wind will come through and disturb things. And I'm in 6 years now, and I couldn't do that right out the gate. It took time. I just finally planted cover grass a couple weeks back max, and there's thousands of little patches of grass, and within a few years I'm confident that this will just be completely covered, if not sooner.
That's what it's about, folks. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. This is a long game thing. And so you have to prepare yourself ahead of time. So take your time to do your research. Don't just jump into it. Do your research first. Find out what's going to work for you. Even down to the structures that you're going to build, how you're going to build them, what materials. Are you going to use scrap materials to start out and then refine them later on? All kinds of stuff. Are you going to start out with a bus build first, you know, and then move on to a piece of property with no buildings and stay in your bus while you start irrigating, providing water and food, and then you can build a more permanent structure? How are you going to do it? There's a lot of different ways, but again, you have to do your research so you know what you're doing each step of the way.
We'll go work on the horses a little bit. So if you notice, income is at the very end, and that's truly how it worked for me. Like I told you, I just set up a website, did some social media, came up with a product I was passionate about. You can read all about exactly how I did it in my free guide on the website. And it wasn't until just recently that I finally really fully understood where my value is, what I have to offer people, and redesigned my website to meet that need. And that's basically just helping people to find property and start their own homestead. And you know, the very most important takeaway is I had the camper right out the gate. I paid cash for my cabin, did it slowly within my means. I own it. I don't need to pay rent or mortgage. That saves me a huge amount of money that I can reinvest in myself and my homestead. And all of that together, I think really, it's all the little things that add up to a successful homestead. And this applies to anyone's life, whether you want to be a welder or live in the country or in the city, or you can apply these same techniques across the board to build something that has more structure, less pressure, a little bit of stability. That's all I got to say about that.
A little bit of stability. And that stability is, like he said, appreciating. It's appreciating your own abilities to do what you should be able to do naturally. And that's what we're bringing this information out for, is because I think getting back to our simple nature, we're going to be a lot more successive and progressive. So let's take a look at the next one. Come on.
How do you start a homestead with no money? One of the #1 searches on my YouTube channel. It's not going to be very realistic for the average person to start a homestead with no money whatsoever. But that doesn't mean that it can't be done with a fairly small budget and some planning. The #1 thing that I see that really scares people away from homesteading is the permitting process and buying the land in the first place. I've seen a lot of people watch my channel and think that they need to start their homestead on a piece of property as similar to mine as possible to succeed. And really, that couldn't be further from the truth. There's land all over the United States, which is far better than mine. And they all pretty well have the same kind of restrictions. There's pretty well not such a thing as no restrictions land. You're probably going to need a septic system. You're probably going to need permits to build a home. You might not even be able to live on the property while you build. That's pretty common, and it just needs to be part of your plan if you want to succeed. Part of succeeding off-grid for me has included having the right power station. This video is sponsored by DJI. Just give me 1 minute and we'll get right back to the video. homestead. So how did I start my homestead? Well, I got a fire that was lit under my ass when I was laid off. That was the motivator. And I had always wanted to start a homestead. And I decided now's a pretty good time. So I started to look and do some research, and I found that property in the Southwest was a lot cheaper than most places. And that's because people think that if you can't just immediately drill a well, or if there's not a huge river running through your property, that it's not good land. In fact,
In fact, that is false, because that's what I'm talking about with the watershed. Our natural abilities to look at the land and see how the water is laying and running across it, and our abilities to construct and mold that land like clay to retain that water in certain areas, is our ability to make the world our own. And that's what we're looking at. The land is not desolate. It just needs our tender touch.
many places will let you harvest rainwater, and if that's not an option, it doesn't need to be a catastrophe. Make it part of your plan. I found myself a piece of property that is in the middle of nowhere. I was confident there wouldn't be anyone out there. I pulled up GPS and took a look around and saw that there wasn't any properties. And I decided to pull the trigger sight unseen, which you shouldn't do. You need to do due diligence, but it wasn't really an option at the time. I did call every department in the county, asked them every question I could think of. I probably asked about 15 questions to every department. You know, you want to know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of my main prerogatives, is to get people in the mode of asking questions, not making statements, asking questions. Let them fill in the information. And this is where you need to learn how to ask good questions. So you have to think about this stuff first, contemplate it in your mind, write your questions down, read them, see if they really make sense, rewrite them if you need to, and then go to these people and ask them. It seems like a lot of work, but if you do your diligence, I guarantee you, you're going to end up as cream of the crop. You're going to end up in your natural abilities, finding life much simpler and much more appreciative. I am positive.
Oh, does your property have easement? Can you get access to the property year round? Has property around you been perk tested? Are you likely to pass that perk test so that you can get a well or a septic system installed? How deep are the wells around you? There's information. You can find out how deep wells are in the area. That way you'll have an idea how deep yours would potentially be. There's no guarantee, but this is doing due diligence, finding out the most amount of information you can to eliminate or reduce, a catastrophic event. You don't want to end up buying certain pieces of property that you can't get access to, or that are completely landlocked and you got to pay too much money to the neighbor to get easement to your property. There are complicated things, but overall, people are inherently good, and you'll probably be able to find out pretty quickly if your land will do what you need it to do. People ask me what website I bought my property on, and I didn't buy my property on a website. I did a Google search looking for the specifics. You can put in keywords. You can put in no restrictions and find places that are more lenient, but they all have restrictions. And then just kind of reversed that process until I found a private owner that had a piece of land I was interested in. And then we used a title company to make the payment, kind of like an escrow. I sent the money. They have like automatic receipt system. It's trustworthy. Do your research on the people you're paying to make sure you're not going to get scammed, and you should be good to go. Needless to
dissecting the ego with the surgical knife, from the depths of the abyss to the clarity of mind, leaving the noise and the drama behind.
say I did this when property was a little cheaper. It seems to have been, well, it's always historically gone up. That's what makes it a good investment. But land was a little cheaper when I did it. And then a lot of people started.
My apologies. I was trying to make a point there, and I didn't realize I was muted. The imperative here, I always recommend buying from private owners as a top priority. Look for your private owners first. If you get into any kind of properties that are publicly owned somehow, you're looking at a tangled web of zoning ordinances that you're going to end up having to jump hoops and hurdles to get through. And that's what we're talking about here, is it makes it so much harder. So make sure you do your research. And if that's the kind of property you're going to buy, you're going to have to do more research. I assure you. I mean, it's going to be a tangled web. They're going to have all kinds of restrictions and limitations that just sometimes seem impossible and redundant, and certainly quite expensive. And of course, only for their pocketbooks.
thinking they wanted to buy land and whatnot, and it raised the price a little bit. But you can still get a really good deal, close to what I did. And I literally spent less than $2,000 cash outright for my piece of property. It's every bit as easy to come up with reasons to succeed and to do what you're passionate about that it is to come up with excuses not to do something that you really want to do. If you start a homestead, you don't need to pay mortgage or rent anymore, and that's one of the biggest bills around. If you grow your own food, you can highly offset your cost for food, if not damn near eliminate it. It has never been easier to work for your
Highly offset your cost for food, if not eliminate it. I guarantee you, with the pigs, and he's got a couple horses. I don't know if he's got horse meat. Didn't have any saddles on him, but I don't know. I imagine he's going to use them for something. But chickens, goats, things like that, they're not expensive to keep when you start learning how to produce from the land to feed them. You're just tending it so that you can provide for their necessity locally instead of having them to graze around the countryside. That's one of the advantages here, is knowing how to produce for yourself and your livestock for a meat growing portion. And one of the things I recommend is rabbits. Rabbits, if you have the right nutrients and everything for them, to keep a good stock of rabbits, you have pelts, you have meat, and you have fuel. You can take their pellets and distill them, ferment them, and then distill them into a fuel.
Self than it is right now. Just yesterday, I had somebody comment, hey, not everyone can do that because, they can't just sit around and YouTube will take care of them. Well, I've got news for you. YouTube is one of the smallest sources of income that I have. And this day and age, you have a YouTube and you have a YouTube and that other guy had a YouTube also. You have to put some work into it. So you have a YouTube, right? Is it paying you? You have to put.
See, he started out without it. And here it is 6 years later. And now it's only because he has the channel and he's putting out educational information. He's now monetized and making money off of the advertisements. And he's not making money off of donations and stuff, but maybe some off of subscribers, memberships, as well as, like I said, the AdSense as a YouTube partner. So that's an automatic thing when you get into these things. If you're going to be doing this homesteading, off-grid, boondocking, self-sufficient community type things, and making a journal of it for educational purposes, sooner or later that monetization is just going to come along with it if you're doing a good job and you get the followers and subscribers and stuff. So again, that's not the purpose of it, but it does come. His purpose, like he said, is education.
Work into it. And I know a lot of people hate the idea to work, but it's really rewarding when you do it for yourself. So anybody can start a YouTube channel. And if you're posting regular content, whether it's daily or once a week, and you're putting energy into it and you're doing research and you're getting better at it, it'll be one hell of a way to market your business, if nothing else. Social media is an amazing way to market your business. And then that leads me to another idea, is whatever you're passionate about. If you like to color in coloring books, just to give you the most frivolous idea ever. Oh, you're really good at coloring in coloring books. I guarantee you can make a website and sell your pictures that you simply color. And it's because as people get to know you, they'll like you and want to support you. And, people will buy your product, especially if you put effort into it and make it good. So you could be a woodworker, a welder. You could mow lawns for a living. The other day I hauled my trash out like I do a couple times a year. And I thought, gosh, if I needed some sort of income, a lot of people could make a killer income off of just hauling trash for the people in their area. So think about it. There's got to be 50 people within an hour right here. And you could make a relationship with those people and say, hey, once a week, I'm going to come haul your trash off. You never need to worry about it again. Keep it in bags, keep it nice and neat. I'll be there once a week. And you come up with your price. You reverse engineer your price. How much money do you need to make? I need $4,000 a month to get by. There's 100 people out here, just for the sake of simplicity. And so you need $40 per person to make that $4,000 a month. So once a week, you'll come out and you'll do their trash for $40. Well, actually, you would only have to do $10 each. Come out once a week for $10 each time, or $40 a month. You got your $4,000. And that's how you reverse engineer how you're going to make an income. And you can create many, many, many different sources of income. And they don't have to involve manual labor. Anyone can do this. I promise you. Look at any neighborhood and you'll find a 15-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid going door to door with a lawnmower. And he's essentially doing exactly what I.
And that's kind of how I started out. I had a paper route. And because of the paper route, during the wintertime, some of the people didn't have anybody shovel the walks. And it kind of made it a little bit hard for me to get up into the front door and stuff. So I would offer to shovel their walks. And that was just extra income for me. Over the years, it built up and developed to a lot of walk shoveling, and it was year round, fall cleanup, summer mowing, spring gardening. And so it turned into, by the time I was 18, I had my own little lawn care and landscaping business. Started out when I was 10 with a paper route, and just word of mouth and learning how to contract myself as a barter trade guy myself, knowing the things that I needed and the things that my customers needed, helped me develop and grow. That's what it's about. Again, the long game.
Just told you to do. And any kid that runs a lemonade stand, it's the same thing. Be good to people, give them good service, under promise, over deliver, and you'll make a living, I promise you. I've lost 160 pounds since I lived off grid, and a big part of that has been my black powder tonic, which is in stock. Save 15% with code Frugal Off Grid. Look, I've got a bunch of packages going out to you guys. This is my herbal tea business. I sell red tea, blue tea, green tea, corn flour.
So he's not just doing YouTube. He's also got a business of herbal teas and stuff. Again, another plus for doing the off-grid stuff, because when you can produce stuff that you can't fully use yourself, you can store some up to barter and exchange with other people doing the same types of things with various different product exchanges. That's our true nature, not the monetary system. However, in this case, again, the monetary system is just a medium of exchange. But you have your creative products, the things that you put your work into.
Our black powder tonic, those are items that I'm passionate about, and that makes it easy. I believe in them. People know I believe in them, and that's why they sell like hotcakes. Make a vlog about your lifestyle. No matter how many people have told their story, you could start a channel tomorrow that's identical to mine, and you'll get a following. Everyone, there's always someone that wants to hear the story again or from someone else's perspective, and you're unique. And it's just a different story from every single person. So don't think that because it's been done before that people don't want it. To recap, the first important thing is you're going to be saving thousands on mortgage and food every month.
And don't be thinking people don't want it, because as we move into the future, more and more people are wanting it. This is a growing movement of off-grid lifestyles. A lot more people are doing it. They're getting more accustomed to the idea that you don't need these big lavish homes. And a tiny home is actually much, much more efficient and even most often more comfortable.
So if an example, you made like, well, let's see here. So if you're saving $2,000, that's $24,000 a year. So say you make $24,000 on your homestead, right? The savings you're saving also makes it, what did I say, 22 or 24? So you're making $48,000 now. It's 20, you know what I mean? Like saving that mortgage and food money is huge, and then create multiple sources of income. And what happens is,
multiple sources of income. We hear this in the old adage, don't put your eggs in the same basket.
It's a little more sporadic than a 9 to 5. You can't guarantee every Friday you're getting paid. But if every other Friday you get paid by your garbage hauling service, and 3 times a month you're getting paid from, your ebooks that you've written, and then on top of that, your website, a few times a week you're getting sales, and that money comes in with a couple days or so. And so you got all these different things hitting your bank account. It makes it easier to get by, and you can get by on less. You don't have to have the flashiest car. This is another key thing. Don't waste money on a brand new truck. Buy one a few years old. Build stuff out of scrap material when you can. I didn't buy these dogs. These are all.
Yeah, stay frugal. Stay thrifty. Be very thrifty in what you do. Use and resource things that have already been used, recycling them. For crying out loud, if your truck goes down and you can't possibly repair it, you can certainly get the engine out and scrap it and create a raised garden with the back of the truck, with the bed of the truck. And of course, you can make a doghouse out of the front cab. All kinds of interesting ideas to be able to reuse products and things that are broken down for other purposes. Repurposing, resourcing.
All rescue dogs, except for my first dog, Incas. I bought him over 10 years ago. But the rest of my dogs I've acquired because Helga, for instance, wandered onto my homestead starving, and now she's happy and a little overweight, and we're working on that. And Stapes was given to me by the woman that brought me the pigs. She had a litter, didn't necessarily need 5 or 10 more dogs. And then this guy, Malleus, he's a Kangal. He's worth a lot of money. Highly desirable dog. Somebody had him, wasn't in the ideal situation, and wanted to pass him on to a good home. And so, you can do that in so many ways, guys.
Yeah, Kangal. Those Kangles are big dogs. They can get up to like 200 pounds, and they will protect. A lot of weight to do so as well.
I've got a beautiful stallion, and well, he wasn't getting along with the other male on the ranch he was on. The other males, they weren't necessarily doing well together, and they needed to get rid of him. And so actually, I got him for free. I don't think I ever told anyone that. And you don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right? And when I got him, I thought, well, he needs a friend, and that little filly is beautiful. And I bought Ginger, and I bought her for like $500. So a lot of people love to give me shit about the horses because this is Frugal Off Grid, and they think that's not frugal. That's an expensive hobby, this guy said. It's not a hobby to me. That's farm equipment. And
yep, like I said, farm equipment. He can put a plow behind him and not have to worry about any kind of technology or anything other than the plow. You know, going back to natural resources that are maybe not quite as convenient, but certainly aren't near as expensive. Particularly, like I said, if you can provide what those horses need for feed on the land itself, plowing the field to grow their own food, along with plowing other fields and stuff to help grow your foods and products. Amazing stuff. And like you said, 24,000 on one end, 24,000 on the other end. That's 48,000. You got to look at things in the proper perspective, folks.
it's education for me and companionship, which is cool, but it's also transportation in an emergency. And they're
Bingo, multi-purpose, also transportation in an emergency.
definitely earning their way around the homestead. Not to mention, they'll definitely keep predators at bay. Coyotes don't want to mess with this guy. What do I love about homesteading and having a frugal homestead? I get to be myself every day. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. Oh, here's a weed. I always, if I see something spiky, I pull it and get rid of it. That's why I don't have any goat thorns. But you get to be yourself, you know? Do what you want to do. I probably work harder than the average 9-to-5er, but I'm working hard on stuff that I want to do. And this includes work. This right now, I make a list.
Yeah, so it's, again, another thing you got to remember when you go into these properties that are so-called desolate, it is labor intensive. So doing it by yourself is something that you can appreciate tenfold. When you've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 people working together, it's so much easier. Okay? Think about these aspects, folks.
Every day, and I check off everything. Today, first thing, I had to feed the animals, work out, and now I'm making some content. After this, I'm going to pack orders for my company. I might even go live and pack orders live for you guys. People seem to really enjoy that. And it's all planned out. I get to do what I love to do. I get to do what I'm passionate about. You can easily be negative and make reasons to complain about this. One of the main things people say when they try to shut this idea down is they're like, you still have to pay property tax. What? That's the downside after everything. So you save thousands a month, but you're.
There you go. You still have to pay property tax. No, we are finding ways to help discern the imposition of having to pay property taxes on a piece of land that we own privately for our own sustaining of our own life. For what is it? Oh, Dean, help me out. What is it? Necessity of life. We got the land to live off grid as a matter of necessity of life, to produce our own foods, meats and vegetables, and live as inexpensively as possible, not to provide commerce. Now, this guy here, like he's saying, he's using it as a business thing. So he's got property taxes. But again, I'm betting those property taxes are a little over evaluated as well. So it's always a matter of questioning that record as to what is the commerce if you're not selling products. Okay? If you're just using it to sustain your own self as a matter of wild refuge and somebody that's just living off of the land, not using it for any kind of commercial purposes, then why are there taxes?
You're worried about $100 a year. Wouldn't you give up your mortgage if you pay $100 a year to live a better life? I like to do stuff people told me I can't. I harvest tens of thousands of gallons of water off of the rain harvesting surface areas on.
So Dean Phillips says in Washington, for wants of goods and chattels, you get off tax rolls. They'll remove you from the tax rolls if you can show that you have no goods and no chattels. And the record will reflect that, folks. unless you've got a business license and doing having a certificate of good faith or whatever it is in the state, registered and everything, is the record of the chattel saying that you are selling services or products, the goods. For wants of goods and chattels, you get off tax roll. So if there's no documentation that you're a business, and this is why I say you have to be careful when you run these YouTube partnerships. That's a partnership with a business, and therefore it's a business partnership. So there is a tax roll. Okay. But if you're not doing that, if you have no goods and chattels for sale, buy, exchange, whatever, then no, you can't. They can't charge you a tax.
My shop and my agricultural shed. I even use the driveway and my land all the way out to the front gate, pushes water through the swells around the root cellar and down into my pond. I have a recharge pit over here for groundwater recharge. I'll build it up until I can put its own well in there, and we'll see if I can make my own little aquifer. And if I can.
And that's what we're talking about as well, that water shedding I was mentioning. When we learn how the land is running its water and everything, we can help it build those natural water holes, those cisterns and everything that will hold water in that area and keep that soil moist and help build that to a black earth with full of nutrients and everything, instead of being so dry, hard, and desolate. That's our true nature. That's the replenishing of Mother Earth.
I had a lot of fun doing it, and I'm putting more water into the ground, period. I have dug underground cisterns that are 3,600 gallons apiece, and they fill with water from the rain.
3,600 gallons each. I think he said he's got 2 of them.
People tell me to cover my pond and there would be less evaporation, but there's hardly any anyway, and it wouldn't be a pond. I love the pond. Swells around the property that direct water to the pond. That 4,500 gallons filled in 1 hour, and I've used thousands of gallons out of it since then, and it just continues to get topped off with water. And even throughout the whole winter, the snow melt does a pretty good job of topping that pond off, and the little bit of rain that we get. I get to grow my own meat. I know where it's been. I get to harvest their manure, make compost. I create my own nutrient-dense soil, garden, geothermal greenhouse. I'm just saying there's a lot of reasons to do something like this. And if you just tell yourself why you should do it, I think you can work it out and make yourself a homestead with the least amount of money possible.
Absolutely. The least amount of money possible. That's what we're looking at, folks. Frugal, thrifty, as little as possible, simple. And again, it's going to take some of that physical manual labor. But again, depending upon how many of you are involved, it becomes easier. This is, again, the local community is where your power sits. So let's look at the next one. Let's see.
Hey, I'm
here.
John from Frugal Off Grid. Welcome to my free webinar on how to start a homestead in 2025. I'm going to condense this little webinar. It was 1 hour and 40 minutes originally, and I'm going to condense it down to a real quick free version for you guys, just so you can check it out. And if you want to purchase a full-length webinar, you can check them out on my website. There's a link down below. I've lived off-grid for 4.5, going on 5 years, and I have some pretty good suggestions on how you might want to start your homestead in 2025. In this webinar, I'm going to cover how to find and buy land, how to build your homestead, how to generate income from your homestead, how to eliminate debt, and then how to thrive, become more sustainable on your homestead. One of the very most commonly asked questions I get is how to find and buy land. And there's a lot of land search websites out there. My number one advice to you is to...
So if you're taking notes, you'll take notes on the general aspects, and this is going to help you develop your research so you can start asking those questions that we spoke of earlier in the video. Asking questions is the foundation of education, and if you learn how to ask the right ones of the right people, you're going to find yourself much better off in your discernment. Beware and be wise.
Actually use search engines. Of course, you can use all of those land buying websites, but if you search for, owner financed land, an example on Google, you're going to pull up land from all over and search the entire United States. That's how I found such a good deal. I wouldn't be concerned about where you see somebody else homesteading as much as where you can find the best deal, because you can make any land in the United States work for you. I would highly consider owner financing or paying cash. You might not have phenomenal credit. If you do, good for you. And if you don't, owner financing is a good way to get a piece of property when you might not be able to pay in full. And paying cash is powerful because, in example, I offered 10% below what they had my property listed for because I was paying in full. And they said, sure, we can do that for you. You want to save what you can, getting prepared to find and buy your land. You know, paying cash is king. And if you can create some sort of savings, that would be pretty smart for you to do that. You can offer less. Like I just said, because I was paying in full, I offered them about 10% less than they were asking, and they accepted that because they wanted the money right away. And finally, you know, you'll have to have around a 600 credit score, and you'll have to have some pay stubs proving that you have income, but maybe USDA loans is the only way you can go. And they have loans for rural land and a program to help people like you get started.
This is where I'm going to mention, this would be a good time to do research on federal grants for such stewardship of land. There are areas in this United States, I'm sure of, that are, quote, desolate, and they are looking for people that would be able to tend that land. And so therefore there are, I'm sure, some grants out there, and I will do some of my own research and maybe come up with a few streams in the coming week or so on that very aspect. So be watching for those. Be sure to check out any kind of grants, not just the USDA loans, but grants for partnerships in stewardship.
Building your homestead. When I came to my homestead, it was just bare land, and I had some survival skills. And so I thought of it as shelter, water, food, because if it's freezing tonight, you could die. So you need shelter right away. You could go a couple days without water, but you're going to need water right away. And you could go maybe a month without food, but pretty quickly you're going to need food. And so ideally, of course, just start out the day one with shelter, water, and food. And in a survival situation, think shelter, water, food in that order. You want to get them all together if you can, but you can't always. So if you go day one onto your land in a camper van or an RV, a lot of places will allow you to get a permit to stay maybe 28 days, then leave town for the night and come back. And, you know, you can continue to do that. You'll have shelter day one. And if you got a little bit more money, there's ways that you could do a shed conversion or build a home or a cabin, or maybe you've got the money to put in septic right away and start a home with a building permit and all that. Great.
And they have places all over the U.S. that actually will build little 12 by 12 sheds, 12 by 24, 24 by 24, that are actual cabin style things. And you can customize them with ramps and stuff like that if you want to store a vehicle inside and use it for an actual garage, or a front door and a back door with a chimney and loft and everything for an actual cabin to live in. So check those out too.
Try to have shelter on day one. A well is the obvious go-to for water, right? But it can cost $100,000 or so to drill a well. Maybe you can't do that. Maybe you can harvest rainwater. Maybe you can use cisterns to harvest a lot of rainwater. And of course, you could haul water on a trailer if that's possible. And you want to create food. So you need to think about gardens, manure, and livestock. Livestock will create manure for you. And everybody thinks of growing a garden. I'm going to grow a lot of food, you know, fruit and vegetables, and that's cool. You know, you'll get 30, 50 pounds a few times a year. But really, if you want to feed yourself and be sustainable, it's a lot easier to grow hundreds of pounds of meat than it is to grow hundreds of pounds of fruit and vegetables. So you might want to generate your income. I generate 100% of my income from my homestead. You might want to do that too. You know, my suggestion, I've brought in income in non.
And another thing I want to mention here, you mentioned the livestock. And when we talk about aquaponics, you can set yourself up with a good population of fish too. Tilapia, bluegill, smallmouth bass, largemouth bass. You get a nice enough size piece of land, you can build your own, you know, 1-2 acre pond that would have all kinds of fish, and then a floating platform of plants with their roots going straight down into the water. Natural system with no pumps or anything. So again, a matter of knowing the different techniques and how the land does it naturally anyway.
Entrepreneurial way my entire life, and I would tell you,
relinquishing the need for so much technology, so much PVC piping for an aquaponics or hydroponic system. If you have an aquaponic floating platform on a pond with natural fish inducive to the area, it's an own natural biome. It's water shedding.
to start today, that would be your first thing. Create a website. you know, maybe some sort of media. Maybe you want to be on TikTok or YouTube or any other social media. Start a blog on your website. And if you don't want to be on social media or websites and stuff, you can even do hand painted signs and flyers the old fashioned way. It's the same kind of thing, but the internet is one hell of a tool if you want to put it to use. What are you passionate about? I would do that. And I think the reason that works is if you're passionate about knitting scarves, well, you're going to have a good time doing it. You're going to be excited when you're telling people how to knit the scarf, and you're going to make cooler content. You're going to get less bored of it. It'll be more fun for you. It's fulfilling. And that's why, you know, whatever you're passionate about, whether it's playing the violin, making lemonade, you know, do what you're passionate about and get paid to do that. You can copy your childhood lemonade stand. You know, think about, even if you saw a full-grown adult sitting at the corner and they had a really beautiful, maybe they took like an old horse trailer and made a beautiful space, a little business, right? And they're selling lemonade out of there. Wouldn't you be like, wow, they're really, it looks like they've got a beautiful little business going. They're motivated. They're passionate about it. You're probably going to support that person. And, you know, you can think of it as a mowing business, providing better service and so on and so forth. You know, maybe you're more comfortable with the idea of lawn care or whatever, but those ideas work. Those ideas work. And so think about what you like to do most and create something like that. It's that easy. And always try new stuff. I had never hosted a webinar in my life until a couple Saturdays. Well, 3 Saturdays ago, I did this webinar. It was an hour and 40 minutes. First webinar I ever did. Extremely successful. Thank goodness that I tried it. You should always try new things, guys. So eliminating debt was huge for me, and it's probably huge for a lot of people. You know, more than 50% of Americans are in debt. These are some things I would suggest. Pull your credit right now. You are entitled to pull it for free. You can see it. Maybe there's some old judgments and things on there, and you just dispute them all. There's a law that you can do that. You might as well take advantage of that. You're trying to turn your life around now, aren't you?
Hey, see how big that dog is? That's a big boy. That's the kind of dog you want. You want a couple of them big ones. You got a large acreage, get you a few of them big ones. Get you a couple of little heel yippers and get yourself some herding dogs. The ones that'll take on a good bite. Anybody invading your property, any kind of predator.
Yeah, so go on there, dispute everything. You'll be surprised how much of that might just fall off, and start saving today, no matter how much you can save. If that means wearing crappy tennis shoes for a year, then wear the crappy tennis shoes and just put that money aside. Whatever money you can put aside, just start doing it, and it'll start to add up sooner than you think. If you've got a few credit cards, you may not realize if you're keeping those cards full, basically, you may be spending a couple $100 a month, throwing that money away just to keep those cards rolling off. And you could get a similar benefit from them by, well, pay off the small one first, okay? And then only ever use that one card if it's really important, like your battery goes out, buy that battery, and then hurry and pay it off before the end of the month. And then now start working to the next card, pay it off, and the next one, try to pay them off completely. And then, you know, maybe you use one occasionally to do a bigger project, but do your best to pay it off before the end of the month. Or maybe, you know, maybe it's going to take you 3 months. You got to do this big project, but pay it off right away and stop paying them $200 a month and use that money to help you get ahead. And finally, once you kind of get things going, you want to thrive on your homestead. I set this up a little differently. Maybe it's more motivational, but I think that at this point you should start to enjoy your life. You know, you can create boundaries, keep negative people out of your life, negative employers. You don't have to work the rest of your life for a crappy employer. Why don't you quit? I can't.
This is why a lot of people are wanting to go off grid. All this interruptions in their lives by people they really don't want interrupting them. They're looking for some of this solitude. That's what this guy enjoys about it, is his solitude. That's why it doesn't bother him to be doing this alone. He actually appreciates it more.
Yeah, you can quit today. You know, sometimes it's, you know, you want to set up securities. So find yourself 2 or 3 jobs and then quit. But why? You don't have to work for that crappy boss the rest of your life. You can improve yourself. Focus on improving yourself. Don't be critical of other people. Be critical of yourself and make yourself better. It's the only person you got control of anyway. Read more books, learn a lot of stuff. You can journal. You can eat healthy. Make sure you're getting sleep. You're an adult now, right? Sleep is huge. You'd be blown away at the difference in how productive you can be if you get that sleep. Helping others, it's really fulfilling to help other people. You know, if you can help somebody do something that they need to do, that's going to make you feel better. And it makes you wanted and needed and more, well, it just feels good to help other people. And you can be kind. You don't need to be a pushover or weak or anything to be kind. You can still have your boundaries and be rock solid, but you can be kind unless you're really cornered. And stop complaining. I hear people in my comments all the time. They complain about, you know, oh, well, I can't do that, or this is why it's harder for me, or blah, blah, blah. There's complaints and complaints. And, you know, you can, when you come up against something, you can complain about it, but that's useless. It's just going to make you and the people around you feel crappy. You can accept it. That's a whole lot better, right? Just accept it and move on. Life is way better. or you can change it, you know, and sometimes that's the best thing to do. Sometimes accepting it's the best thing to do, but never ever complain about it, because you're just digging a hole for yourself and the people around you. And that's part of, don't be a victim. Your life isn't harder than anybody else's. Everybody has only lived their life. And so your perceived difficultness is probably the exact same as their perceived difficultness level. You know what I mean? Like, I can't do that because of this. I can't, my life is harder and whatever, you know. If you don't be a victim and you don't complain, and instead you just change it, you know, if you want a new truck, just figure out a way to get it. If you want to start a homestead, just figure out a way to do it. And then if you never give up, you can't fail. No matter how hard it gets, no matter if you go hungry, no matter if things keep going wrong and you keep failing, those are just stepping stones to succeeding if you don't quit. And that pretty well concludes my first webinar. Like I said, it was an hour and 40 minutes in the original, if you want to check out the full thing. And then I go on to, I have 6 total webinars. So the next webinar, I cover only, like I expand on finding and buying land. We talked about it briefly in here, and I talk about it for about 10 or 15 minutes in the full length one, but then it has its own webinar that's an hour, hour and a half. And I'm talking about only finding and buying land. And then I do an entire other webinar on building your homestead, an entire webinar on generating income, eliminating debt, and how you can thrive on your homestead.
Absolutely. How you can thrive on your homestead. Various different classes that he's providing. And I think he's doing a pretty good job so far. These are the kind of people I'm interested in doing interviews with, as I spoke about earlier. And mentioning the interview aspect, this gal's link is down in the chat as well. Kirsten Dirksen. She is one that goes around the nation and does interviews with people like this, off grid, Frugal Off Grid. And this is her interview of him.
15 miles.
And I'll just give you the start of it. But her link is down in the chat as well. And
we're out here, but decent roads for being dirt roads.
Yeah, they maintain this whole county road
just for
us.
Your drive to a supermarket,
It's an hour to the nearest town,
okay,
and 2 hours to a city if you want, like, you know, anything.
So he's a ways off grid, and this gal went out and did an interview with him on his Frugal Off Grid homestead. And she does it, like I said, she goes around the nation doing these interviews with these same kind of people living this off-grid lifestyle, showing you all the different techniques and styles and talents that we spoke about earlier. And this is the aspect I want to take up on the internet, is to do these reviews and then contact these people that I'm doing reviews on and have my own set of questions to ask them, to then, of course, be part of the podcast TV as far as the different technologies, the pros and cons, and what we can do to get back to our nature. That's the whole purpose of the Short Bus Podcast TV, is to have open discussions about this technology, what it's good for, how it's abused or used, what we can do as remedies for those abuses, how we can enhance the uses to help benefit from having to do so much labor. As I mentioned, it's labor intensive stuff. So this is the purpose of the Short Bus Podcast TV, is to educate people that are interested in alleviating that grip on them from this false patriarch, this government system, and living off grid, even if you have to live on grid and develop off grid at the same time, so you can eventually have a place off grid to go get your solitude before you return to the grid. All different levels that we want to educate people on, because we want everybody to partake in it on some level, whether it's full-time or part-time, as a part of our own nature to steward the land, nothing else, but be productive and prosperous in creating a good plush land that is green and watered, water shedding, like I mentioned, and bringing life back into these dry, arid soils. The area may be dry and arid, but we can keep water in those by learning the water shedding and make them more pliable to our true nature in being able to live off grid and sustain ourselves locally and not be so dependent upon all these foreign exchanges and trade deals and everything on the international level. That weakens us so much when we become dependent from an entity that is so far away, we cannot possibly hold it accountable, demand transparency, or have any remedy in it. Our remedy is our true nature, in my opinion. So please enjoy everything. I want to thank everybody for joining me today and hope to see you again in the future. In the meantime, God bless.
Step into the light or the shadow it casts. A look in the mirror, stripping the mask. The ego deflects what the id wants to hide, but we find the truth on the edge of the slide. The void isn't empty, it's a canvas of gray, where the ghosts of our bias come out to play. You point at the monster, you point at the screen, but it's only a shadow that's being seen. We sit in the silence where the tension is rife, dissecting the ego with a surgical knife. From the depths of the abyss to the clarity of mind, leaving the noise and the drama behind. High etiquette held as the ultimate key. This is the Short Burst Podcast TV.